Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome here to the launch pad and our live launch coverage of Starlink 6-1 launching from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We are now L-9 minutes and counting until launch. And if it's your first time here, welcome here at the launch pad. It's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow because we believe that space is better together. We're glad to have you joining us here this afternoon. Who knows what time it is? We were all up for Crew 6 last night. Ultimately, that got aborted, but NASA and SpaceX are now targeting March 2nd for the next launch attempt of Crew 6. We do have our live countdown for Crew 6 with our live pad view now up and running, so you can keep an eye out on the pad. But we're here for Starlink 6-1. We're glad to have you here. Take a moment, engage that like button, and share out the stream. It really does help us out. And as always, let us know in the chat where you're watching from. We'll do some shout-outs here in just a little bit, but as we wait for SpaceX to get their live feed underway here, when we'll listen in to an update from them, make sure you head on over to tlpnetwork.com, click on launches, and you can check out our detailed mission briefing for today. Today's is a Falcon 9 Block 5 booster launching from Slick 40. This is where you can learn more about SpaceX, the engines, mission timelines, and everything, so definitely check that out. Of course, it's also launch day, which means you can get 10% off of everything over on the shop using promo code LAUNCHDAY. Global shipping is available, and you still got time to get your Crew 6 teas while we count down for launch. We've been keeping an eye on the weather down at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Right now, as you can see there, everything is green across the board from the Space Force, and that's a great sign that we will see a rocket launch here in just 7.5 minutes. Now, SpaceX is getting their live feed underway, so of course we're going to listen into them in just a moment for an update on the rocket, but we'll be answering your questions live throughout today's stream, so make sure you're sending those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad, and we'll work on answering those. But now let's listen into SpaceX Mission Control as we count down 7 minutes, 12 seconds, and counting to liftoff of Starlink 6-1.
Good evening. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 with a beautiful sunset in the background, set to lift off at 6:13 p.m. Eastern Time with 21 second-generation Starlink satellites on board. Hello, everyone. My name is Ronnie Foreman, and I'm a commercial sales manager here at SpaceX. I'll be your host for today's Starlink mission, which marks SpaceX's 212th overall mission, 13th mission in 2023, and the first launch of our Starlink V2 satellites. The satellites flying on today's mission will be the first of our second generation of satellites, also called V2 satellites, to fly. The full-sized V2 Starlinks are designed to be flown on Starship, while the satellites we'll be flying today, which we refer to as V2 Minis, have been modified to fly inside the payload fairing on board Falcon 9. Don't let the Mini name fool you, though. The V2 Minis are bigger than our previous satellites, and more importantly, they include more advanced phased array antennas and the use of E-band for backhaul, which will enable Starlink to provide about 4 times more capacity per satellite than earlier iterations. This means these V2 mini Starlink satellites will ultimately enable us to provide more bandwidth with increased reliability and connect millions of more people around the world with high-speed internet. Among other enhancements, V2 Minis are equipped with new argon Hall thrusters for on-orbit maneuvering. These have 2.4 times the thrust of our first-generation system, and it will be the first time ever that argon Hall thrusters are operated in space. To date, Starlink now operates in 49 countries and territories around the globe, including Rwanda, our most recent addition. If you're interested in learning more about SpaceX's Starlink satellite service, please visit starlink.com. And on your screen now is Falcon 9 at our Launch Complex 40 in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Currently, weather and range are both green for launch, and we're proceeding
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
We're proceeding with a T0 time of 6:13 p.m. Eastern Time. The teams are currently tracking no issues with the vehicle or payload. And liftoff is just about 4.5 minutes from now. You can see the clamp arms have begun to pull away from the vehicle. And you may have heard that call out just a second ago that we're preparing to fully pull the strong back away from the vehicle. Perfect timing on the call out there. Here we've got the clamp arms opening, and again preparing to pull the strong back away from the vehicle. The strong back has two purposes for us today. Not only is it supporting Falcon 9 currently on the launch pad, but it was also the system we used to roll the rocket out to the launch pad in preparation for liftoff. The next milestone we're coming up on in just about 45 seconds will be completion of liquid oxygen load on board the first stage.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
So at just over T-minus 3 minutes, the Falcon 9 first stage is now fully loaded with rocket propellant 1 and liquid oxygen, or LOX for short. And we're awaiting completion of LOX load on board the second stage in just about 50 seconds. You can see some clouds forming around the booster on Falcon 9. That's actually the gases above the LOX tank venting to maintain a constant pressure. In just about 26 seconds, we'll see Stage 2 finish up LOX loading.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call out, Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of fuel and liquid oxygen. The booster you see on screen is flying for the third time today, having previously supported CRS-26 to the International Space Station and OneWeb Launch 16. After liftoff and stage separation, the booster is scheduled to land on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, this evening, which is currently positioned in the Atlantic Ocean off the east coast of Florida. Coming up next, we should hear that Falcon 9 is in startup mode.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call out, we've heard that Falcon 9 is now on internal power, and the batteries on board the first and second stage will manage Falcon 9 during liftoff and ascent.
LD, go for launch.
And as you just heard, the launch director has given us the final go to proceed for launch. Let's watch as Falcon 9 takes our 21 Starlink satellites into space.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. 6-9.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
If you're just joining us, we are T plus 30 seconds into our mission today, and Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at 6:13 p.m. Eastern Time.
Power and telemetry is nominal.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
With that call out, we hear that Falcon 9 is traveling faster than the speed of sound, around 770 miles per hour.
Max Q.
Max Q is the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle that it will experience during flight due to the forces of thrust, gravity, and atmospheric pressure. So we're just about 1 minute away from several events happening in quick succession. These are going to be main engine cutoff, stage separation, second engine start 1, and fairing separation. Main engine cutoff is when all 9 of the Merlin engines on the first stage shut down. Stage separation will be when the first and second stages separate from each other prior to first stage reentry. And second engine start 1 is when we light the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Shortly after that, fairing separation will see both fairing halves separate from each other, then fall away from the second stage and return to Earth for recovery. Incredible views of the Earth behind Falcon 9 on your screen now.
We go.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
So we just heard confirmation for successful main engine cutoff, stage separation, and second engine start 1, which you can see on your screen now. Coming up in just about 20 seconds, the fairing halves will separate from the second stage and fall back to Earth.
Fairing separation confirmed.
So there you saw and hopefully also heard fairing half separation. As a reminder, both of the fairing halves flying on today's mission are flight proven as well. Both are flying for the second time and our booster for its third. We will attempt to recover the fairing halves again today using our recovery vessel, Doug. Currently, the first stage is on its way back to Earth towards our drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, on the left-hand side of your screen, and our MVAC engine has been lit up on the second stage. If you're just joining us, today's mission is a SpaceX Starlink mission. And as most of you know, Starlink is a constellation of satellites in low Earth orbit, designed and manufactured by SpaceX to provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people living in remote and rural locations
Signal, Bermuda.
around the globe. We're currently live in 49 countries and 61 markets around the world. As I mentioned earlier, we recently went live in Rwanda. You can see on the Stage 2 telemetry that Stage 2 continues to pick up speed on its way to space. And of course, Stage 1 is on its way back home. Great views of the grid fins as Stage 1 makes its way back to our drone ship, a short fall of gravitas.
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
The next milestone we're looking for is going to be Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1, also known as the booster, will ignite 3 engines to slow it down for atmospheric reentry.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
As a reminder, the first stage on your screen right now, being used to launch 21 Starlink satellites into space, is flying for its 3rd time.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
That's confirmation of entry burn shutdown on the first stage, which is the first of 2 burns the booster will complete during this return.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 2 continuing on its way to space with 21 Starlink satellites on board.
Expected loss of signal, Cape Canaveral.
Stage 1 transonic.
You just heard the call out that the first stage is transonic, which means it is traveling near the speed of sound as it returns to Earth. In just about 20 seconds, we should be coming up on the landing burn for the first stage.
Terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 1 has lit 1 engine to prepare for landing on our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. This final burn slows down the rocket to help it stick the landing on the drone ship.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing descent.
Great feedback from our team there, and of course, beautiful views confirming that we have successfully landed Stage 1.
Eco 1.
Nominal or parking orbit insertion.
Falcon 9 has successfully landed on our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, marking our 174th landing of an orbital class rocket. And shortly after first stage landing, we also heard successful shutdown of our MVAC engine and good orbital insertion for those 21 Starlink satellites.
And if you're just joining us, welcome here to the launch pad. That's a live view of the Falcon 9 that just successfully landed on the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. You can see there their automated systems beginning to activate on the ship as they safe it before it begins its journey back to Cape Canaveral in Florida. But if it was your first time here, though, welcome here at the launch pad. It's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow, because we believe that space is better together. We're glad to have you here today. We got 53 minutes, 22 seconds until deployment, and we're going to be answering your guys' comments and questions live, so you can send those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad. They can be anything to do with Crew 6's events last night, today's mission. Just make sure you're tagging us, and we'll work on answering those. As always, though, we want to remind you it is a launch day, which means you can head on over to our shop, tlpnetwork.com, get 10% off of everything on the store there. As well, got a couple of my favorite items, the Starship Orbital Tee, Spaceport Florida, which we'll have to update soon, and of course we got our Crew 6 tees as well, so definitely take a moment, check that out. If you want to know about upcoming missions, though, you can head on over to the website, get into the upcoming launch control, and that's where you'll be able to see all of the upcoming missions as well as our detailed mission briefing. So lots of stuff coming up. It's going to be a busy March with some hopefully exciting launches in there, possibly the orbital launch test of Starship. And we will be down in Texas, hopefully bringing you live coverage of that. So stay tuned for that. But We're going to be hanging out with you for the next about 52 minutes as we await for confirmation of payload deployment of these new Starlink satellites. You can keep an eye on how long that is in the timer in the top corner there and keep sending in those questions for us. First question I'm seeing coming in here. Stupid Fluffy's asking, why does transonic and supersonic matter? That is just some of the checkoff sequences so they know how quickly their booster is moving. So if they know if it's transonic or supersonic, that's a range of speed that they're in. So it's an easy idea to have based on that. Absolutely, Chrissy. Glad to have you here. Billy Bobble, can you visually show where the two rear-facing stage 1 cameras are, please? On the first... Ooh, that is a... I wouldn't have something set up for that right away, but we can try to get something out for that maybe on our Discord. I'm not sure we have an exact location for those, but we would have an approximate idea of where they are for sure. Let me see if I can get more info on that. Gal is asking an important question. Do you think the ISS may be coming down in 2024-25? I forgot one of the two. Do you think there will be another? Thanks for sending that in, Gala. Space Station was scheduled to come down in 2024-2025. It's now been extended for operations until 2030. And its retirement won't begin until 2031. So we do have more years of the International Space Station. It's been expanded multiple times. It was supposed to come down in the late 2010s, so it's getting another 10, 15 years of life than was expected. There will be more space stations, but there will not be another International Space Station. We will have the Lunar Gateway launch coming up in the next 2 years. The first couple modules will launch on a Falcon Heavy, with an extended fairing. That's going into lunar orbit. And then we will see Axiom Space Station. It's a private space station. It will actually build onto the side of the ISS, separate, and then a few years later, the ISS will retire. We also have a number of other space stations in the development. We have Orbital Reef. We've got Star Labs, which are smaller ones that they kind of want to almost like be the Airbnb in space, where you can rent a station in low Earth orbit for as long as you need, and then you leave and someone else can come in. And there's other stations. We also have the new Chinese space station. Russia's working on their own space station, but at this time, NASA is not planning a new space station. They are going to work with their commercial partners and find spaces on those other stations that they can use. It's financially makes more sense. It makes it's faster to happen because commercial space moves faster, and it'll help bring costs down. As well, just overall that, the taxpayers don't have to pay for the entire station. They're only really paying into the budget of NASA that's going to the actual use of the space station. So we do have some more time with the ISS, though. But thanks for sending that in. Great question. Ted, did you get the globe of the Earth yet? Not yet. We had a couple things come up that we've had to focus on, but it will be coming soon. Don't you worry. We will make sure that appears there. Dreamland, how is the SLS going to come down? I'm assuming you're meaning the core stage or the SRBs. The SRB and the core stage are already down. They came down pretty quickly. The second stage was in orbit and would eventually decay. And I think Jay has a good point, except for Gateway. That is part of NASA. But that's been in works for like a decade. So new stations, they're not working on any at this time. If you're just joining us, though, welcome here to the launch pad. We got 47 minutes, 50 seconds and counting until payload deployment of Starlink into low Earth orbit. We are answering your questions live, so you can send those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad while we await for payload deployment. For those that were watching and didn't get the update on everything that happened last night with Crew 6, unfortunately, there was a launch abort. Fortunately and unfortunately, there was a launch abort. We all wanted to see it fly, but Safety is the number one priority, and unfortunately there was an issue with the T-tib, which is what helps ignite the Merlin engines. So they did abort with 2 minutes 14 seconds on the clock. If you want to learn more about that, you can head on over to tlpnetwork.com/news. That's where we put out all of our news articles. We've put out a number of those today. We put out one about the abort, and then we did get an update early this morning from NASA and SpaceX with a new target launch date. They are now targeting March 2nd. So we're counting down to that. We are 1 day, 20 hours, 3 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. For Crew 6, we will, of course, go live a number of hours before launch to bring you full uninterrupted launch coverage of that. But safety number one priority. Crew 6, they are healthy and safe. They are back in crew quarters, continuing their quarantine, and it almost was treated like a wet dress rehearsal all the way down to that final count. So they got to run through it again, so they get to do it one more time, and hopefully this time they'll actually launch up to the International Space Station. Catching up on your guys' question. WTX. No, greens. And correct statement. Yeah, there's no crew on board 6-1 Starlink. Crew 6 just happens to line up that they are the numbers. 6-1, though, this is the first launch into the 6th shell of the Starlink constellation. So great to see that happening. SpaceX has a certain number of Starlinks they have to launch into each shell by the middle of their kind of launch window from the FCC, and that it comes up in 2024, and then they have the rest by 2027. So we're going to see them very quickly starting to fill some of these shells to at least what they have to get to by the minimum of their launch time. Otherwise, they risk actually losing their frequencies. So they do need Starship to get online here in the near future. So they will be able to deploy enough Starlinks to make that system. Capstar, I heard that Georgia lost its bid for its launch facility or whatever it was to the FAA and the federal, I'm assuming you mean government. It would be, I know there was a few different places looking to do launch facilities. I know right now they don't seem to be expanding and building new ones, but I know there was more recovery centers being looked at as well. So I'll look into that one and get a little more information on that. On what that was directly relating to. Absolutely, Gold. Thanks so much for being here. I've got Starlink as well for our portable, for our mobile units for when we're out in the field. So when we hopefully are bringing you Starship launch coverage, we will be doing through Starlink. So excited to do that. Billy Bobble, if the same fault occurred on a Starlink launch, do you think they would have still launched? They would have been flawless so long with Starlink overdoing safety. Billy, I'm assuming you're meaning with the T-tib situation on board. Yes, SpaceX was go for launch last night, but it was a NASA safety parameter that they would not approve the launch, and they were not go in that sense. So SpaceX has their limitations. NASA has more, because safety is, of course, priority one for NASA, especially when crews are on board. SpaceX safety is important as well. SpaceX knew their system would still work, but it didn't check all the boxes for NASA. So that's ultimately why we had that scrub last night. If you're just joining us, though, just over 20 minutes ago, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We're now counting down just under 43 minutes until payload deployment. We're going to keep answering your questions live, so you can send those in the chat. We'll take a quick commentary break, and I'll be back with you shortly. But stay with us right here on the launch pad as we count down 42 minutes, 42 seconds and counting until Starlink deployment. Stay with us.
Acquisition of signal, Western Australia. Go ahead, SSC.
Pico 2.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Well, if you're just joining us, you heard it there. We had a successful second engine burn SES-2 and SECO-2, a very quick 2-second burn of the second stage of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Had a little audio glitch there. Bear with me just a moment, but if you're just joining us, welcome here. 54 minutes, 54 seconds ago, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carrying the first version 2 satellites of Starlink launched from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, and we are now just about 8 minutes away from payload deployment. We are listening in to the mission nets for updates. We heard there SES-2 and SECO-2 and a good orbit being confirmed. You can now see that white and blue lines going completely around the Earth here. The second stage is now having downlink from Western Australia, and hopefully we will still have downlink when payload deployment is confirmed, so we might be able to see them, but if not, we will at least hear it from mission control. If you guys have questions, you can send those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad. We'll work on answering those over the next few minutes while we wait for that payload deployment to confirm. But I wanted to jump over to a question we had earlier about where is the camera located on the Falcon 9 rocket. So we've pulled this together here. Thanks to our news team for making this happen. But this is that camera right there. That camera feed that we watch when the booster is coming back down to Earth. I know there was some questions on that. So wanted to get that answer, make sure we verified it. This photo's from SpaceX, so we know that that's a good image to be going off of where that camera is. But yeah, if you guys have questions, you can keep sending those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad. We'll continue working on answering those. Of course, mention it again, it is launch day, so you can get 10% off of everything over on our shop, thelaunchpad.store. You can get 10% off there using promo code LAUNCHDAY. Definitely check that out. You can still get your Crew 6 tees as well. And so you never miss another launch, head on over to tlpnetwork.com/launches. That's where you can see our global launch calendar and see all the upcoming missions, as well as our detailed mission briefings for each mission. Crew 6 now targeting March 2nd, just into March 2nd, so we'll begin our coverage on March 1st, but you can check that out, learn more about the astronauts, the payloads, the missions, and everything there. So we're glad to have you with us here, though, as we await for confirmation of payload deployment of Starlink in just over 6 minutes from now. Catching up on the questions in the chat. You can keep sending those by tagging us at the launch pad.
Signal, Western Australia.
So there's confirmation of loss of signal there. We'll see if we have another signal picked up right around when payload deployment occurs. Sounds good, Cap. Sorry, I just saw that message. And yeah, I'll double check that after the stream. Catching up on your guys' questions here. And I think we're all set up. STG. So right now we have no downlink from the second stage due to its location. We just lost signal from Western Australia's ground stations. We're waiting to hear confirmation of them picking up that signal again, with payload deployment expected in just over 4.5 minutes. Ginger's asking, how do you like Starlink? Are you happy with it? Yeah, it's worked well for us in the field. It's definitely helped us when cellular wasn't necessarily an option. We've done a couple live streams on it, so it works pretty well. It depends where you are, how your coverage is. There are times that it can be a little spotty between handovers between satellites. It doesn't compete to anything like fiber, and that's what our main studio here is run off of, and some of our other studios. So you can't really compete with that, where like in our main offices here, I get 1,500 down, 1,000 up. You're not going to get that on Starlink for a very, very long time, if ever. Can't compete with that, but it is enough to be able to do data feeds and send video feeds into our studios here, where we do more of the heavy work, and then we can transmit from there. So definitely is a great option. It's more affordable than some of the other options on the market as well. Bailey, is TTEB used to start the second stage as well? Yes, TTEB's used on all the Merlin engines. Dreamland, camera's glitchy. Well, did it glitch out for a minute? Had to adjust that. I'm sorry, yeah, I remember the Spaceport, Texas discussion we had about Star. Okay, awesome, yeah. But if you're just joining us, welcome here to the launch pad. We're now just under 3 minutes away from payload deployment, waiting to hear confirmation of that from SpaceX. Jerry's asking, will Starlinks go into different orbits? Yes, so they have 6 shells, so 6 layers of the Starlink constellation in orbit. This is the first payloads being deployed into the 6th shell. That's why today's mission could have... Well, there is the camera. I'll have to figure out why it's doing that. They have a little more flexibility in their launch window because it's the first one. As they fill in that shell, they're going to have gaps that they have to fill, and then they'll have an instantaneous window to be able to get their satellites right where they go. But 6-1, first one to this new shell, and then those go in an orbit and fill around the world. So though they deploy in the same path all the time, because of when they've launched it, they fill in circles, and they slowly, cover the whole planet there. So... So yes, they do have different orbits there. Now under 2 minutes to deployment. Well, that's fun, Capstar. I don't know why it's doing that. It shouldn't. It's a good camera. It's not a loose wire, I don't think, but we'll have to check and see. Might be time for an upgrade. We're about 90 seconds from deployment, so they're going to deploy just north of Australia, Southeast Asia kind of region there. We're unsure if we'll have a live view of the second stage for deployment, just due to possibly not having ground station coverage. So that's something that we don't get to choose whether we get to see it or not. That's a SpaceX thing. So we hope we will see it, but it's probably unlikely. But we will wait to hear confirmation of deployment. Now, just under 1 minute to deployment here. Hopefully we'll get that live feed there. We want to hear them say acquisition of signal. That means we'll have that video feed, but so far nothing as of yet. Again, if it's your first time here, though, take a moment, engage that subscribe button so you never miss another live launch coverage, docking, undocking, or return to Earth coverage. And make sure you subscribe to our new channel, the Launchpad News. That's our second channel. That's where you can get all of our space news updates and our exclusive interviews. We got 2 interviews coming up this week, one with the Director of Space, Commercial Space with the UK Space Agency, and one with Copenhagen Suborbital, having an update on their rocket and their parachute systems. So excited to get that out to you here this week. And we are 5 seconds away from scheduled deployment, but we may take some time to actually have payload confirmation confirmed. Deployment should have just occurred, and we'll wait to hear a confirmation. There we go. Right when we got the acquisition. Can we see a camera? Show us a camera. Waiting for that confirmation of deployment. Always is a little delay on video feeds generally as well. So we'll wait to see if we get that confirmation. If we don't, we'll wait for confirmation on Twitter.
Deploy confirmed.
And there we have it. Deployment confirmed. The first Starlinks of the sixth shell of the Starlink constellation have been deployed in orbit. Well, that's going to do it for us here today on our live launch coverage of SpaceX Starlink 6-1. As I said already, take a moment, engage the subscribe button both here and our new Launchpad News channel, and consider joining us over on the TLP Discord. It's free to do so. We can't do this without your guys' support, and we so appreciate our awesome community. But that's going to do it for us here today. We hope you'll join us for our live coverage of Crew 6. We've got our countdown to Crew 6 launch coverage already underway. But that's going to do it for me from here in TLP HQ. Well, my name's Zach. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.